The two dominant forces, right, that exist in our world is reward and punishment. Reward and punishment are the two forces that govern absolutely everything about how our world works. Okay? Absolutely everything about how our world works. Just give me a moment. I just want to make sure that we are all being shared the same thing. I hate that I have to kill this punchline, but we know how much Microsoft Teams can give us so much drama, particularly as a presenter. Okay, the two dominant forces that govern everything are reward and punishment. Okay? And when we are thinking about reward and punishment, I need us to take a much broader aspect and understanding. When we are talking about punishment, we are talking about discipline, which is both physical or verbal or a whole bunch of other disciplines, right? Discipline is a very, very big aspect from law, right? In terms of punishment, in terms of what is legal and illegal, in terms of things that happen in our home, how we speak, the language we use, everything. Punishment can also be shame, right? When we shame somebody for something, when we exclude somebody from something, when we give a sense of disapproval of people in power and rank, our parents, the people around us, the friends, people we care about, when they disapprove of something, that acts as a punishment, right? When there's a sense of disappointment that exists within a certain space, when we are rejected, when we are alienated, or like we said, excluded as well, right? Even if I'm ignored, there's a sense of punishment. If I'm uninvited, and also if there's a sense of danger. Punishment in our society is incredibly broad and incredibly deep. So I don't want us just to think like a smack on the bum, right? No, absolutely not. It is everything about all of these elements: discipline, shame, exclusion, disapproval, disappointment, rejection. This is what governs our lives. On the reward aspect, right, again, we have monetary reward, that we reward people monetarily, right? That's part of our life. We have social media in terms of followers, like, oh, I'm getting more followers, right? This is a reward. Amazing. We have attention is also a reward. If I am all of a sudden given attention by somebody, the opposite of punishment being exclusion or alienation, certain privileges that we give to some people and not to others, praise, recognition, right? This is so true. Affection as well is very, very, very much a reward. When we get likes on social media as well, compliments, gifts, and of course celebrations, this all sits within the reward aspects. Now here's the thing: everything about our society is governed by reward and punishment. Everything about your behavior, from the things you say, how we are in certain spaces, in planes and airports, in restaurants, in the workplace, in our home, with our friends, on the streets, on the train, in the subway, everything about our behavior in society has been governed by the boundaries of reward and punishment, right? It's speaking too loud in a restaurant and the people next to you give you a look like that, right? That's a punishment. It's like, that's behavior we don't tolerate here. To the most serious of committing crimes or violent crimes, right? There's a sense of punishment there. Everything about our behavior in society is governed by the boundaries of reward and punishment. Identity as well. We always like to think that we are these individual, unique people. We are not. Everything about our identity has been determined by reward and punishment. What is a good woman? What is a bad woman? What is a good boy and what is a bad boy? What is a good white person and a bad white person? A good black person, a bad black person, a good Christian and a bad Christian, a good gay and a bad gay. All of these elements, right? Everything about our identity exists within the bubble of reward and punishment. That's so often we hear, no, that's not what women do, right? Or we don't want people of color to speak too loudly. That's a bad person of color. Do you see how everything about who we are is not so much actually about our own free will, but has been guided by the elements, the boundaries of rewarding certain identities and punishing other identities. From the job we choose is governed by reward and punishment. If I want to be this artist, it's like, oh yeah, but Roy, who's going to pay the bills, right? Everything about what we do in life is about reward and punishment, about what I wear and what I choose to wear. And is it revealing? Is it too revealing as a woman? There's going to be a punishment for that. Oh, she's an, or he's an XYZ, whatever the case may be. If a man wears a dress, right? Oh, there's going to be a punishment there. There's a social punishment from who we marry, who we decide to marry, the food we eat and how much we eat, right? There's punishment and rewards for that in terms of what our bodies look like as well. And of course, also the things that we buy. Guys, everything in our lives are determined by reward and punishment. Everything about you and your life has been determined through the forces of reward and punishment. And here's the thing, we don't really know this because it happens so subtly and from such a young age. Don't do that. No, that's not how we do that. Or shh, you need to be a good boy here, right? And good girls don't do that. They go into that space. Everything about us is about reward and punishment. And why is this? Because our brains love reward. When our brains, or when we are rewarded, a chemical called dopamine injects into our brain and it says, I like this feeling. Everything about our brains are geared toward reward and rejection, moving away from punishment. So while we may want to do something in our bodies for ourselves, if society, what determines reward and punishment, doesn't reward that, we are going to follow the thing that is going to give our brains that dopamine, because that is how we are biologically wired. So here's the thing, right? This is the interesting philosophical question for me. Who decides what behaviors are rewarded and which are punished? Who has decided which identity behaviors are to be rewarded and which are to be punished? Who decided what is a good girl and what is a bad girl? And what is a good leader and a bad leader? Who decided that this is good and that isn't how we do it? And who decided these things? Because these structures exist are very, very, very real rewards and punishments that have impacts on our lives without us even knowing. And none of us really look and say, who decided what behaviors are rewarded and which are punished? And here's the thing. What has determined, or who has determined which behaviors we reward and which are punished, are mostly linked to dominant ideologies in our world. Again, we're getting philosophical here, we're getting deep. The idea of dominant ways of thinking in our world have determined which we say yes and which we say no to, which we reward and which we punish. And some of the dominant ideologies, now some of these are going to be controversial for you. They're not, right? It just is what it is. And this is not about shame or feeling bad or feeling embarrassed or feeling guilty. This just is what it is, right? Some of the dominant ideologies we have in our world is that of whiteness. That there is, particularly in my country here in South Africa, it is almost seeing white people as like the standard of reward, that the closer I can get to whiteness, I'm going to be rewarded. If I can speak beautifully like white people, I will be rewarded. If I don't speak beautifully or speak like an African person, which happens here all the time, I'm going to be punished. That whiteness is a dominant ideology that says, this is what we reward. These are the behaviors we reward. The ultimate white person is the stuff that we reward. Dominant ideologies of masculinity, that men need to be strong, steady, successful, outgoing, and that women need to be meek and quiet and in the kitchen. And if they're too hectic in the workplace, right, it's like, oh, I know she's very aggressive, eh? And then we have women saying, you know who's the worst bosses are female bosses because they try to be men. Because we know that women, particularly in organizations, most often feel that in order to be rewarded with promotions, with leadership positions, they have to show elements of the behaviors of masculinity. We know this, right? Heterosexuality, absolutely an ideology that has set the boundaries of what is rewarded and what is punished in terms of sexual identity, in terms of gender expression, who we love, who we sleep with, who we marry. Everything has been determined by that, right? And there are real punishments for not. rejection of your family, being cast out, physical discipline, corrective rape. There are so many elements in our society that is trying to push people, that's where we need you to be, in this heterosexual, heteronormative space. Elements of Christianity, right? Often we think that Christian values are human values, but they're not. They're Christian values, right? Not to say that they're good or bad. None of this is about good or bad necessarily, but it says this is a dominant way to be. This is what we think we're going to reward, and then we're going to punish certain of these aspects as well. Christianity is absolutely a dominant ideology. Then we have Eurocentricity. For all of you sitting there in Europe, trust me, coming from down here in the southern tip of Africa, we know that European standards, European ideals, European behaviors are the things that we reward. So go to a European university, try to speak like a European, right? Try to have some European experience. That's what we're going to reward. We don't necessarily want to, and some of the stuff that we punish is anything that is anti-European, that seems anti-Western. Absolutely real. And then, of course, and this is often a very controversial one, I can't understand why, it just is the dominant ideology of capitalism. That we reward people who are productive, who are studying law and engineering and technology, not necessarily the arts and politics and all of these elements, right? So we gear our universities and our schools and everything to this idea of we're going to reward this type of behavior because it serves this dominant ideology of capitalism. So here's what I'm saying, and I don't think it's that controversial. Everything in our world, whether we like it or not, is run by two forces of reward and punishment. And the boundaries of what we reward and what we punish are determined by the dominant ideologies in our world. And everything is for there to push us to try and be and perform the closer we can to this perfect ideal of whiteness, masculinity, heterosexuality, Christianity, Eurocentricity, and capitalism. Everything about it, okay? And here's what reward and punishment has done in our society. Firstly, it limits my identity and my expression, that I am boundaried, that I can only be a man in X, this and way, but I can't put on a full face of makeup and go out because then I'm a bad man, right? It limits our identity and expression, but we're not even talking about that today. We don't even have time for that today. We're going to be talking about this. Really, what reward and punishment has done is it has merged or conflated our behaviors with our self-worth. What it says is that you are only good when you behave in a way that is rewarded. If you do not, if you're a bad boy, then you're a bad person.